Good morning and welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways, Coyote in the Highlands. I want to talk a little bit more about freedom, current events, programming, abundance. I did a really short video on this, and I warned that it was going to be like 3 or 4 videos over time. I have an insatiable appetite, it seems, for the distractions of current events. They're amusing. They're great. They're fun. They're just fantastic, full of amusement. There's a lot of deep programming with those current events, with specifically which ones you are allowed to see, allowed to know about, which ones are chosen, and how they are presented to you. There is a definite cultural program to keep you stuck in worry about the future, regrets of the past, and the way, how do you phrase this? The way they present information and outrages, the outrage of the moment or the current thing, is designed to keep you from your life, or from your present moment existence, from actually breaking out of that shell and that programming. So, one of the side effects of that is that people have different levels of anxiety and, the big 5 character traits like agreeableness and conscientiousness. People have a different set of anxiety responses or levels of anxiousness. Neuroticism is the technical name for the trait, but people don't really like that word, right? You're neurotic is such a value-laden, judgment-laden thing to say, but it's actually just a character trait that can be used, understood and used. So depending on your anxiety response, the news and the constant drumbeat of this crisis or that crisis designed to convince you to give other people power, well, depending on your response again, you can end up honestly feeling powerless, that the problems are too large, too imminent, and you can live your whole life on the edge of disaster. I've been in the environmentalist, like green, I've been focused on that. I've been paying attention to that. I've been in and out of the communities since I was a kid, so it's the 70s. My first dream job was to be a dolphin riding tuna rancher, right? That was actually a thing in the 70s. We were going to have the wide open ocean ranches and dolphins working with a symbiotic to, farm the sea, tuna, salmon, haddock, whatever. And of course, dolphin research basically ended after the one crazy guy went a little too far with some of his research and some things got reported. And the thing is, I don't think that research... conspiracy brain. We still work with the dolphins. We just do it on government levels, and there's no public research. Anyway, that was the dream. It was a reasonable dream in the 70s. And the house I grew up in was going to be underwater, and then it was going to be under a glacier, and then it was going to be underwater, and then under a glacier. It's still there, like, a quarter mile from the beach. That's one of the houses I grew up in. The other one in Scottsdale, was supposed to be uninhabitable because of the heat. Whatever. I grew up with that. I also grew up with the survivalist community. The two have never been completely separated, okay? Every time you find Back to the Landers, you're going to find the survivalist prepper types, you're going to find the green types, and there's a lot of meetings in the middle. There's a lot of cross-pollination. So I grew up with the survivalist stuff. I grew up part of my childhood as a military brat. And we had, depending on where you were in the world and stuff, there were actually classes about stuff, like counterterrorism classes, what to do if you're kidnapped, how to not get kidnapped, what to look out for when you're walking home from school, and nuclear war, the threat of nuclear war. There were some really interesting manuals that I read when I was in middle school, just because I had an insatiable reading appetite, and my father had mass casualty manuals for what happens in nuclear warfare and how to deal with hundreds of thousands of people who you just have to let die, and weird stuff. So I grew up partly with that. The point is, the world has been ending as long as I've been aware of myself. Like, as long as I can remember being aware of myself. The world has been ending. And it has been ending imminently. This year, next year, this season, this week, next week. Oh my God, the food shortages now. Now it's this, now it's that. Pandemics, whatever. And the climate emergency, the climate crisis, which it never ceases to amaze me that the problems that we actually need to look at, like water supply and humanocentric, human-affecting pollution, are the things that we don't ever look at, because the powers that be want to program you to powerlessness, and having problems that you can solve goes away from that. So everything you're going to be worried about is the wet bulb temperature and the mass extinction, and the greatest extinction event in planetary history could be called the Cambrian explosion. Think about it. Okay? I'll explain it later if you don't get it. Now, the whole point here is to keep you powerless. When you get into that doomer mindset, when you look at the endless crises and the inability of mankind to ever solve these problems, and it's too complicated and it gets all weird, remember that you are being programmed. This isn't something that is a natural state of being. Okay? You're being presented with information. Even if you go looking and you find the research studies and stuff, remember, science, especially academic science, is politically motivated. Okay? People are putting money in the hands of the people who are going to give them the answers that they want, that those big people want. And one of the things they want is for you to feel powerless. So the climate crisis is one of those really good ones, okay? And they simplify everything to some way to increase their power. Carbon taxes and carbon footprints are a really masterful stroke because you can have carbon credits and carbon this and carbon that on an industrial level, and it leaves you, me, small businesses, every individual, everyone completely out of the game, completely powerless. Now, how would you accept that? How are you going to accept that all of this is being done by huge power-broking elites? Well, you're not, unless the problem is too big for you to handle and you have to let global communities or large organizations or the government solve it. So you are programmed to look at these things. Truth is that I don't like the UN. I don't trust the UN. I've never really liked the UN, but I read their stuff. And the best guess I can say is that the UN's probably right. The best way forward to peak and then taper the population on the planet and to have better sustainable civilization is actually cheap energy. More cheap energy, and education will reduce population growth. Probably too much. We may peak around 8.5 to 9.5 billion people and then drop off. And if we drop off to like 5 in a generation and a half, that's actually going to be problematic if you're looking at a world that's built for 7.5, 8.5 billion people. Good news is technology will probably work that problem out even better than any other, provided we stop thinking of the idea of energy itself as evil. Different topic, different day. So I looked at the UN stuff, and poverty, absolute global poverty, the worst part has been eliminated by 90% in the 21st century, at least to COVID-19. I don't know what they're doing. It looks like some people are really bound up, globalists are really bound up on creating poverty at this point. So I don't know how that's going to work out. I suspect that once you give people a chance at a standard of living, taking it away from them is not going to go over so well. Starvation is political, purely political at this point. There's no structural starvation on the planet. We've kicked all of this. We've come to some basic sustainable forward trajectory. Look upwards, ad astra, at the stars. Okay? And if you do, we've done a really good job. We're in a really good spot for a lot of advances, technological, societal advances. And that includes regenerative agriculture and people being able to go back to the land and interconnected rural communities and localism and distributism. That's actually part of the positives that we have. You don't need a doomer outset to get there. You can do it much better with a positive outset mindset. All right, it's a abundance and escape. It's one of the things I'm looking at on the property and probably need to talk about in a homestead video. So the abundance is there. The programming is to keep you in a doomer mindset, to keep you thinking that the world is just this close to total collapse. And I'm not saying we don't have problems. I'm not saying that our money system isn't being manipulated by the elites for the elites. I'm not saying that we don't have a big clash, this big thing. The one thing that I remain polarized on is that freedom versus authoritarian anthill, that movement of humanity. It's a broad human movement. Are we going towards freedom? Are we going towards anthill? The elites, for whatever reason, in their neuroticism, they have fears of that open freedom, like that boundless freedom. A lot of people have that fear, okay? And so they try to crunch it down, control it, and they want a negative-sum game because they want themselves to be in power because they're scared of other people having that power or misusing or being able to do stuff or whatever. So you're programmed constantly, whether the program sticks or not. Okay, I'm not saying you're a mindless zombie robot, but the programming is there. It's going into your head all day, every day, about problems being too big for you and too many problems. Eradicate that. Get rid of it. Think about every time you see one of those articles or one of those things, because you're never going to escape all of it. Think about it from a different point of view. Say, oh, what are they trying to do to me? How are they trying to diminish my life with this report? Not the problem, but with the report. Something to think about, and stay sideways.